Welcome to Storytime, folks. I am your host, Rusty, and today my guest is author Kat Herman. Welcome to the show, Kat.
Well, thank you, Rusty. I'm glad to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your book?
Well, for those who don't know me, I usually run in the paranormal circles and the psychic circles as the Felinist. I do lectures at conventions. Of course, I do readings as a psychic. I do psychometry, and I specialize in Egyptian runes and Egyptian theology. I've also hosted my own radio show on Live Paranormal called The Third Eye Lexicon, and that's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed that. And it's just an educational show about various aspects of spirituality and paranormal topics that just don't run through the mainstream of the typical public forum, I suppose, would be the best way to say that. So a little bit of everything, and I'm working on actually two big book projects right now, and I'm really excited about both of them. One of them is my spiritual autobiography, for lack of a better term. The most common question I get, both from clients and from listeners, is why do I call myself a Felinist and what does that mean? And I decided finally that rather than try to explain it 300 times, I would go ahead and write something about it. And once I got started, it just kind of blossomed into this wonderful project. And so that's what my solo project is all about. It's going to be called Leonine Mobius. I expect it to be in print in the early part of next year. It will be available on Amazon and both in hard copy. And it's going to go into a lot of detail of my spiritual beliefs, how I've grown as a psychic, how I've really come to believe what I believe about the things that I do and about the things in the field, and how that relates to not only the paranormal, but also to my daily life and my job, and just a lot of different things that go with who I am and what I stand for. And my second project, also very happy about this one, is a cooperative project with Paranormal Sarah, which some of you may know. And it is a self-help book for those of you and those of us that not only work in the metaphysical field as psychics, but just those of us who would like to increase our psychic abilities, understand how they work, how they can be incorporated into everyday life, into our routine, how we can utilize it on a just momentary basis. So kind of a little different project there, but really excited about it. I think it's going to be something that people will really get a lot from and really enjoy.
Well, both of those books sound very interesting. I personally would love to read both of them. I read on your biography, the information you shared on your website, that you saw your uncle who had passed on and you weren't even 3 years old yet. What was that like?
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting story. Well, when I just kind of like the website says, I was pretty young. I was just starting to talk at the time, so I wasn't extremely verbose, but I was conversational enough that my mom could understand what I was trying to tell her. And she would come in and find me in my room just talking to no one. And she would ask me who I was talking to. And I told her that I was talking to Dubby. And she was a little scared at first. She didn't really know what to make of it, but she actually did the right thing. She didn't project any fear or any anxiety about the situation. She didn't try to stop what I was doing, she just started asking me questions. You know, who was it? Was he friendly? You know, what did he talk to me about? Things like that. And I told her that, yeah, he was my friend and we talked about lots of things and I really enjoyed him and looked forward to talking to him. And I would tell her when he was in the room and when he wasn't. And I was just really excited about it. He was just one of my buddies. And it wasn't until I was grown that I realized that my uncle, who had passed before I was born, he actually survived Vietnam only to come home and die in a very tragic accident. But his nickname was Debbie. So I didn't know that until I was much, much older. And my mom claims to have seen him a couple times too throughout her life. So obviously he's been around our family and kind of watched over us. So I think that's kind of neat. And he was a very literary person, and he was very educated and had a lot of things to teach people. So it's probably a good person for me to have known even then.
I would say so, and I think it's always nice when someone is watching over you. I mean, I know my great grandmother's here hanging around in my house along with a lot of other relatives. There's actually my house is kind of crowded,
I know that feeling.
but it's all good. It's all family, so it's nothing to be afraid of. And they're very well behaved. When they start chattering or making music at night, and I'm trying to sleep, I just tell them it's bedtime. Go to bed, please and thank you, and they stop. My family listens better when they're dead than they do alive, believe it or not.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with you on that.
I don't know what it is about the afterlife that makes them so well behaved, but I'm not going to argue with it. It works.
Exactly.
So, you also mentioned in your biography that you can communicate with animals and are able to heal them. What's that about?
Um, Absolutely. It's not like I'm sure some of the listeners have heard of animal psychics. I can't think of the one that I really like, who the British gal that used to have her own show on Animal Planet, but it's not quite like that, where she would talk to these animals and hear them speaking in human terms. It's not like that. It's more of an empathic ability, and it's the same way it works with people, in that you're put in their position and you understand their feelings and you understand why they're acting the way they do, only it's a little bit more detailed. For example, dogs and cats don't think the same way people do. They don't think in words. They don't think in sentences and paragraphs and connected thoughts the way that humans do. They think more on an emotional level, and that's just how they are as beings. And they don't have the same concept of time. They kind of live in the present all the time. They don't think about things that happened in the past and things that will happen in the future in the same way that we do. Their their view of time is less linear. It's more circular. And so understanding them takes a little bit of perspective. And I am able to feel that perspective and feel those emotions and that communication in the way that they understand it. So unfortunately, I can't, bark and meow and communicate that back to them, but I understand them in a way that makes it a lot easier to deal with them and their issues and what's going on with their world than somebody who would try to communicate with them as if they were a small person. Not that I don't think that they're intelligent, because absolutely they are. It's just a completely different form of communication. And I would just, ever since I can remember, I've just always been able to understand that language and that communication.
I know animals can be very intelligent. that I know for a fact. The dog I had, we used to say he was the smartest dumb dog we ever knew. Because sometimes he would do things just that would make you, what are you doing? And then other times it'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he thought of that. Like one time his bowl was completely empty. Next thing I knew, I was tripping over it because he had nudged it out from under the kitchen table where we kept it out into the middle of the walkway, so we had to trip over it. But that was his way of getting us to see that it was empty of water and food because we had to trip over it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's probably one of the smartest things I ever known him to do. I mean, he only did it once, but of course that was all it took because after that I always made sure I checked the bowl every few minutes to make sure the water level wasn't low or anything. So all it
Yeah.
took was that one time, and apparently Rusty got the message, and that's all it needed. It was just once for me to get the message. But he was, and other animals. My grandma's parents had a dog, and a relative passed away out west. And at the exact moment that this relative passed away, their dog sat and faced the exact direction. I believe it was in the southwest. But their dog sat facing the direction that this relative was when they died, and this dog just howled. And of course, the way my grandmother tells it, her father, he'd go out, hush, hush, what you howling at, hush. Nothing that he could see, no other animals, nothing that could make the dog howl. And he couldn't get it to stop. The dog just howled and howled. And it wasn't a regular howl. The way my grandmother tells it, it was kind of a sad, mournful howl. And of course, it wasn't till the next day that they found out then that this relative had passed away. And when they found out what time, well, that's when the dog started howling.
Yeah.
So animals, I believe, are more intelligent than people give them credit for.
Absolutely. And their level of intuition about things is phenomenal. I think they're a lot closer to the spiritual realm and the unseen than people are by far.
I mean, this relative was thousands of miles away when he passed away. And this dog in Plainfield, Wisconsin, somehow knew the exact second this person passed away and what direction to face, and just started a mournful, sad howl.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said, the people never knew that this person had passed away till they got word the next day. So, I mean, a dog knew it before the humans did. Go figure.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, folks, we are going to take a brief break, and then when we come back, we will have more with my guest, who is author Kat Herman. So stay tuned.